And welcome. We're about to start our Political Trade Secrets live stream. It'll be coming up here in 3 minutes and 25 seconds. And thank you, everybody who's joining us from across the internet. We are streaming on about 15 different platforms. So if you're watching on X, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever it's at, thank you for joining us today. And we're going to have a really interesting episode. I'll talk about it more after the intro here in a moment, but we'll be talking about how we actually go about the process of designing a poll. And today we're going to be talking about designing a poll of political strategists, both Republicans and Democrats, and what they see for 2026 and 2028, the strategies, the tactics, the technology, how AI is shaping things. And we're going to be seeking your input for this and what this is from. So I'm going to be here talking about it and introducing some segments from an exclusive strategy session from our polling club community that myself and one of my colleagues, Sean Bartley, took the time on Friday with the polling club community to get their input on where we're going to go with this survey. And it's one of the things, if you go to pollingclub.com and sign up to be a part of it as a free member or a premium member, you get to help us shape the national conversation with our polling, bring the American people's voice into it, help decide the questions and the topics that we cover. So really interesting stuff. Also, I want you to stay on until the end. I'm going to be sharing one of my media appearances with Todd Starnes on Newsmax last week. He had a bunch of interesting stories that he covered. There's been a lot of stuff. It's been the same news in the news cycle, tragic events with the Guthrie family and other things like that. I mean, that's really been the main news. And he took the time to spend a little bit more time on some interesting topics, one of which is a neuroscientist who testified to Congress that Gen Z is the first generation to score lower than the previous generations on different aptitude and intelligence tests. And I'll actually explain my perspective as a pollster who tests recall and memory and whether messages stick, and actually some really interesting brain science as to how that really works and really how that could be applied to education. So I was surprised to get the question, and I actually had some interesting expertise to share that actually could make a difference. But wherever you are during this live stream edition, you can join the conversation. You can post comments. You can ask questions and be a part of the conversation. And myself and the team here, we will make sure to bring that into the conversation today. I'll answer questions, or we will follow up afterwards if you're watching this on the recording. So we really do appreciate it. A couple of things: like, subscribe, and follow us wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Again, chat, comment, like, share as we do this live stream. We really do appreciate your participation. Again, we're going to be talking about how we go about designing a poll, but we're ultimately going to be talking about the big issues. We talk a lot about AI. We talk a lot about fundraising and a few other things. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I think you're going to enjoy it. And with that, we're ready to start on with the show.
Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
Pollster and host of the Political Trade Secrets podcast, Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
And Dustin Olson, pollster at American Pulse. They work for both Republicans and Democrats. And he hosts a podcast, Political Trade Secrets. Oh, we love that. We like that podcast.
Now, from Washington, D.C., is pollster Dustin Olson.
And welcome to Political Trade Secrets. I'm your host, Dustin Olson. We have an excellent show for you today. I'm going to be joined by one of my colleagues, Sean Bartley. We're actually going to be showing you some excerpts from an exclusive strategy session that we did for the polling club community, which you can go and join if you go to pollingclub.com. You can be a free member or a premium member. But what we do is we seek your input on the questions and the topics that we cover in our national surveys or other surveys. And in particular for this strategy session that we did Friday, we brought the community in to talk to folks about a survey that we decided to do of political strategists. So all of America's political strategists, Republicans and Democrats, we're going to be doing a survey in the coming weeks, getting their thoughts about what to expect in 2026, what to expect in 2028, who the nominee is going to be for either party, how is AI going to be affecting how campaigns run, and the kinds of things that are good and maybe bad. We're going to be getting input from political strategists. So one of the things that we asked for from the community is what you're interested in. By the way, AI was one of the top things that we got from the community. And for today, we're going to show you these excerpts. You can get the full thing if you go to pollingclub.com and you sign up to become a member and you join the community. You'll also get a few other things. You'll get, a free copy of Sun Tzu's The Art of War with a preface written by me and how we use it in politics, as well as all the other insights that we come up with from our polls. But for today, feel free to comment, question wherever you're watching this, and we'll bring that into our survey that we're going to do. We'll do an episode in the future, and we will talk about the insights. I'll have Sean Bartley on again, and we'll talk about it and really what we learned about what the political strategists, the political professionals, the people who are making politics happen, the people, the strategy behind the strategy, what do they see is going to happen in 2026, 2028? And, feel free to suggest questions. We got people asking about fundraising from the community. They were interested in that. People were wondering what issues might determine, really be the issues that the whole election will hinge upon. We're pretty far out, but people who are actually trying to make certain issues be the issue, they're going to be the people who maybe they'll have their way. So anyway, we really appreciate your input as we go through this conversation. And part of what happened is it really just became a conversation about all sorts of important issues facing politics today as we were looking at what we would ask political strategists. So that's going to be fascinating in and of itself. If you like this podcast, if you want to help us do more of this kind of work, the way that you can help us is on whatever podcast platform that you're watching this, whether it's YouTube or X. 90% of our audience is on X. We really do appreciate that. This month, in fact, we just hit a new personal best. We're approaching 250,000 downloads per month, and that's really awesome. And most of that is on X. Thank you, Elon Musk, for purchasing Twitter and making it X so that could be possible. And we really do appreciate everybody who follows and subscribes to the podcast wherever you enjoy them. That really does help us grow our audience and have a bigger impact and be able to bring more of these great topics with you. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest. It's one of my business partners at American Pulse. We are the ones who provide Polling Club. And Sean is a lifelong Ohioan. He has worked in state legislature. He's worked on campaigns up and down the ballot. He and I have worked together. Our first campaign together was in 2007, a special election for Congress. And, he's done a lot of work on the legislative side. So he's actually worked inside of the legislature, which is really good background for issues in particular in the legislative process. He also works with me at doing polling at American Pulse. And what you're actually going to see is how we start the process of designing a survey. We talk about the issues. We talk about all the things that might be interesting to find out. What is important strategically, and you'll see how we approach that. You're actually going to see how the sausage is made, and with that, it'll be pretty interesting. So, check him out. I think we have him tagged in whatever social media, so you can follow him as well. He has lots of great insights. Again, like, follow, and subscribe. Join the Polling Club at pollingclub.com, and comment if you're watching this live. Comment and join the conversation. We really do appreciate it. But I'm going to go first to our first segment from the strategy session, and in this we're talking about AI, and we're talking about some of the themes that are going to be hitting 2026. In particular, we had done an X survey, and we had done a survey of the Polling Club community and what issues they thought were most important, what's going to happen in 2026, and AI were the top issues. So with that, we'll go on to the segment. Sean, what are your thoughts about the responses we've gotten from folks.
Yeah, well, I think it's not a big surprise to me, at least. I think um, there's a lot of talk about the midterms right now, so it would make sense that people would want to hear what people who work in this regularly think about it. Um, I think the response on the use of AI in campaigns. I think it's something that we've talked about before, and I know you've talked about it in some other appearances. But we saw the use of AI in the New York City mayor's race.
Totally.
You know, uh, Cuomo's campaign had people asking if they could get AI Cuomo to run for mayor because he looked younger and more
So there's people who are doing this well and people who are doing it not so well. And I think their ad, it probably wins a Polly at some point or something. That's the award you get for campaign advertising. But the contrast was a problem. That was one. It was, they had him like swinging from skyscrapers, and he looked robust and healthy and energetic in the AI version. And then they went to him speaking to camera, the real Cuomo, who's the current age of the current Cuomo, not the younger, robust AI version. And the contrast was stark.
Yes.
So that was a bit of a mistake. Justin Germany, who we've worked with in the past, he, over the summer, I think he's one of the first people who did an all AI ad. And this is definitely going to change how people do campaign ads. We've already had some stuff that we've done and are working on that has it on our Olson Strategies and Advertising side, where we do political advertising and consulting. And Justin did an ad for kind of a conservative company. Their audience is a little bit more conservative, but it's a for-profit. It wasn't a campaign ad, but it was all kind of the man on the street style of a ad, which works well for AI, because AI, the consistency between scenes is still a problem for most people. I'm sure there's really good technology that has been fixed, but he was able to do, short, like one line of a, person at a coffee shop, a person on a farm. And you could tell occasionally, just in the way sometimes an AI generated person speaks, is like maybe a hiccup in the sentence. But I would say that there's a lot of customers who would have no idea that there was at all AI. It was a really good use of that, and we're seeing it deployed on campaigns now. I think you're going to have people doing really creative stuff that you would have never seen before because of AI, and I think it's going to be this election cycle.
Well, I think that's just it. AI, it speeds things up. That's one of the things it does. The other thing it does is that it does allow for more creativity.
Yeah.
There are
one person who's really talented can now do a lot more, something that they may have had to have gotten a whole crew together to put something together that would have, a film shoot or a photo shoot or a video shoot, I guess what we call it in this day and age, that if you want to do a really big one, or a decent one, it's going to be $30,000 or more, maybe up to $80,000. If you're doing something that's Hollywood level, it might be even more than that. And most campaigns are trying to get away with doing something that's like 10,000 or 15,000, and that's really tough. But now you could have your candidate on camera for not that much, and then have someone who's really talented, is a good editor, is somebody who has done a lot of photography, and they're good at AI. They can now be the director, the editor, the producer, the sound mixing person, the everything. They can do all of it, and also the computer generated animation as well. They can do all of it.
Well, I think about, particularly when you're trying to tell a very specific story, it used to be almost impossible to come up with the image that you wanted to fit that.
Yeah.
AI has changed that completely.
And even 6 months ago, it was pretty frustrating, but I think it's definitely changing. I'm going to drop my screen here, Thomas. Very good. So on this, the reason why we're talking about this is, so this is the kind of thing that you as the community can tell us, like, yeah, I think this is super interesting. Clearly the people on X thought it was interesting. Thomas, what was we also have input from the club. What was the main thing that people said? Just give me the top thing.
It was also the 2026 midterms.
Okay, very good. So 2026 midterms, what's going to happen there? On the AI, so the question I have that I think we need to add into the survey, and this is the kind of thing that we want you all to suggest, is the thing I'm going to suggest is that we ask, how are you and your campaigns deploying AI? Like, what are the things you're doing? That would be an open-ended question, which I think this survey is going to have a lot more open-ended questions where we don't give a multiple choice. We give them the opportunity to just expound upon what they're doing. This is going to be fielded differently than the typical poll. We have our own call center, so we will call people for this, but primarily we are going to be emailing, which is not the typical way we do most of our surveys, but we'll email a lot of these consultants. We will text them and we will call them on the phone, and that's going to be how we field it. Most of our surveys we do nationally. We do with, it's true quantitative research where we call them with our live telephone interviews from our professional interviewers, and then we do a text to web is what we call it, where it's a text message and they get a link and then they do it in their web browser on their phone, and that really works well. And there's a reason why we do it. We call it multimodal, and that means people from different walks of life and different habits are more likely to participate in the survey if we do it with different modes like that. Not everybody's going to answer their phone, and some people aren't going to do anything if you just kind of passively send it to them. They need someone to talk to them on the phone for them to participate. So we find that works well. But in this case, it'll be email, text, and live phone calls. And people will be able to type in their answers for the text and for the email. So I think we can get some good input from folks as to what they're thinking. So I think that's a question I would ask about AI. Sean, are there any things specifically you would
Yeah,
think on the AI front?
Yeah, I'm interested in what are the fears of AI? Like,
Like what scary stories that these political strategists who are thinking about this could weave a tale about? Like, this is how it could.
yeah, or fears of how it could be used, maybe against you or your campaign, because I think that's another thing to be thinking about.
Well, earlier on in the AI revolution, so I think this was 24 in the primaries, I think, in New Hampshire. So this is before Biden has dropped out. Somebody did an automated phone call using Joe Biden AI voice.
Yeah,
I believe it was 24 primary.
yeah.
Now, is there much difference between a robotic Joe Biden voice and an AI Joe Biden voice? I don't know. So that is who knows? Maybe Joe Biden was the first AI candidate. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that it could be used. One of the things that's going to happen with AI, and I've talked about, this was for the 24 election. I did a documentary for Al Jazeera, which most people don't follow that in the United States, but they're actually of the Middle Eastern news agencies, one of the less biased. Now they're like every media, there's bias, but people do consider them to be one of the better sources for news in that region, as long as it's not on certain topics that are obvious. But they did a documentary about 2024 and also about where political campaigns were going. And one of the things I talked about in that is what's going to happen with AI in advertising. And one of the things that's going to happen, is we already have this where there's been this balkanization, this dividing of the public. Your cell phone gives you a completely different reality based on an algorithm, and that's just getting more and more intense based on AI tools. So it gives you exactly what it wants, but it's going to be able to start not just giving you what you want, but thinking about how to persuade you that's unique to you. And it's going to be on the words it says, but also the emotions that it plays on. Some people are more persuaded by anger. Other people are persuaded by fear. Other people are persuaded by maybe injustice. It's going to be able to have like an emotional profile of you. And from social media and all these other things that are very targeted advertising, you will have a basic video advertisement. It may not even be an advertisement. It might be just a social media video that is served directly to you intentionally, that doesn't look like it's advertising, that the attempt is to actually persuade you personally. So it looks like the same person, might be the same candidate, but it's becomes almost an infinite number of videos that get created, and you have a specific ad that is unique to you. Now, it won't be infinite. It'll be, maybe there's hundreds of versions of this, but they are all generated to be specific on an emotional, on a content, on even maybe color preferences. It could get to a really deep level of perfectly built to persuade and manipulate you. So that's, for me, that's one of the things I see as a thing. It's not gonna be like this year that happens to that level, though I think it's already happening. It's going to be 2028, 2030. That is going to be happening. And that's going to be great for a lot of campaigns to be able to be that targeted. But for foreign actors or other people, that's pretty powerful persuasion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you're looking at AI, I think it opens up so many things, particularly for campaigns, um, particularly for campaigns that maybe have smaller budgets. I think it opens up a lot of things. And then, but for those with bigger budgets, it allows the creativity to just be able to bloom. And
Yeah.
so I think one of the things that's going to be critical for political professionals is how they're using it when it comes to employing their own creativity, and really thinking about how can this be um, employed in a way that can maximize whatever your resources may be, your strengths and your weaknesses as far as.
Very good. Well, that was the first segment we're going to be sharing here. We have a couple more. By the way, I didn't mention this in the intro, but stay on till the end. We have an interesting appearance I did with Todd Starnes on Newsmax, and we talk about education and how Gen Z is not doing as well as the previous generation on test scores and whatnot. And I actually share some of what we know from being pollsters about how people learn and how messages stick and how that could actually help in education. So stay on until the end for that. We have two more segments from the exclusive strategy session. And thank you for your questions. I actually have a question here from Tim G. How do you think they will regulate AI in political campaigns, if at all? That's a great question. And so there are already some laws that do regulate this. So we call it TCPA, and it's telecommunications law. So that person actually already in 2024 that I was talking about that did the AI that impersonated Joe Biden, that was already illegal because they were pretending to be somebody that they weren't. You're supposed to do a disclaimer. The FCC has certain rules in place for, you have to represent who you are when you do a phone call or you do any kind of advertising. There's different rules that go along with that. So when you have disclaimer rules, that actually that accounts for all sorts of kind of technology. So there are already rules in place that actually that person got in big trouble for. They figured out who it was. I don't remember all the details, but they did get in trouble, and they had laws that they could actually use. And those laws have been in place for quite some time, and the regulations change. But that's an excellent question. This is the approach that I think most countries have taken, and surely since the Trump administration has taken office, and we have our new AI and crypto czar. and David Sachs, who's from the All In Pod. We're trying to get their numbers. We'll get there soon, but they're one of the biggest podcasts on the planet, and one of their co-hosts is in the Trump administration and is a big tech guy, and he's really shepherding this. But the approach for most countries right now is Katie bar the door, go as fast as possible. If we don't, and we stop to slow down and smell the roses, then China or someone else is going to get ahead of us, and whoever does win that race is going to be probably the leader for the world for the next 100 years. So, in some ways, that's a bit of an existential threat to allow that to happen. The Biden administration had slowed down AI. I mean, we had Kamala Harris as our AI czar. It was a much different approach. It wasn't quite working. And this is interesting from a political perspective. I'm glad you asked about this, because this is having an impact on politics. In 2026, there's going to be a lot of money spent, a lot more money than previous midterm elections, from a few different interest groups. I mentioned both AI and crypto just a moment ago. Crypto has people who are involved in blockchain and crypto. They have raised somewhere around 150 million last I checked, which was 6 months ago. It might be much bigger than that they're planning to put into campaigns. And they definitely have a bias as to who has been more helpful to them. And that could have an impact on the 2026 midterms. There's also been, I don't know how much money it is, but there's definitely a movement for people involved in AI to be involved in these midterm elections. So that's going to impact how things are regulated. If they have success in who they get elected, that's, dance with the one who brung you. So I have a feeling that's going to have an impact. But, I have a feeling from what we've already gotten from the Polling Club community, which you can sign up to join that by going to pollingclub.com. And then from our X poll, which we started that segment with, 2026 overall, what's going to happen, as well as AI, are the questions that people are asking. People are very interested, and please keep posting questions. That was great, and I really appreciate the insight that you have on that. So, without seeing any other ones, I'm going to set up the next conversation that we are going to talk about here. So we're going to go to segment 2. And in segment 2, we talk about polling methodology and some 2026 midterm tactics. One of the things that we're going to talk about in this is there's a bit of a trick that's being played right this minute. We are literally in the filing period for running for office. Some people have been running for 6 months, a year. However, states have certain rules for when people can register. I think Montana started today. So people started registering to run for office. Even though they've been raising money into their campaign committees and all that for a while, they have a period of a few weeks where they get to decide and to file their paperwork. So there is a concerted effort, and Sean's going to talk about it. I'm not going to steal his thunder, but it's really interesting, and I think you're going to it's going to be a bit of an aha, and you're going to now see it every single election cycle. From the party that's trying to manipulate, retirements, which that gives you a hint of what's going to happen. So without further ado, we'll go to our next segment from the exclusive strategy session with the Polling Club. Let's going back to 2026. We've talked a lot about the tactics that are changing in this cycle. So those are the things that's going to be a big thing, is like where political professionals see that going, technology. We talked a little bit about fundraising, what's happening. In 2026, Republicans have a huge cash advantage. It's why this could be a little bit different of a cycle right now. I think my prediction is that political professionals on both sides will say that it's going to be a quote blue wave. That would be my guess. Now, I track the generic ballot in our in public opinion and public polls, media polls. It is actually they're underperforming where they were in 2018 at this point. It's improved in the last month or so, but they're underperforming. So, but this is something that people don't maybe realize. Political professionals are almost always super negative.
Yeah.
So, So
Well,
the Republicans they always think they're gonna lose. And it might be possible the Democrats think that they're not going to be in as good of a position as they think. Because if there's money problems, if you're not getting paid as much as you like, you might have a different perspective. But fundraising, there's who's winning that. The truth is, though, every campaign, unless you're really a high profile campaign, you're probably struggling for money, regardless of which side you're on. And that's a challenge. Unless you have a celebrity, someone who already has a huge database. I'm curious as to people think that small dollar donors have become a bigger deal than big donors. I'm curious as to what people think about that, and how all that's going to play into 2026. Will the fundraising advantage matter in 2026?
yeah, there's some interesting things. I think the first off, in our role as pollsters, I think, and I think you agree with this. There's a lot of noise in the numbers right now. We're getting a lot of polls that are not the most trustworthy and credible.
And you
And
can go
so,
look at it. I encourage anybody here who's, you're in the polling club, so you like numbers to some extent. If you go to the Real Clear Politics average of polls, which is really the only aggregator left, um, and I don't know what it looks like today, but if you go look at, let's say, the president's job approval, or you go look at the generic ballot, probably president's job approval is the best one to do this on, because it's probably updated the most. You go and you look at it, and they'll probably have 9 to 11 polls in the aggregate, so the average. And then you look at it, and they do a pretty good job of reporting what the sample is. So they'll report 3 samples, and they might not be exactly this, but this is how they report it. You have adults, which means just anybody who's supposedly within the United States boundaries, who is an adult, 18 plus. So they could be an illegal immigrant, they could be an expat from France, they could be someone who's not registered to vote, but they're an American citizen. Like, it could be anybody. It could be somebody who is registered to vote but has never voted. I mean, it could be all sorts of things. And there's a reason why a lot of the public opinion polls are done, the publicly available polls are done that way, is it's cheaper. Like, you can explain this, like, how does an online panel work? Like, you get pricing on this all the time.
yeah.
How does that work?
Well, look, the wider the frame that you have, the cheaper it is to conduct the survey. So let's think about it like this. You do a survey of US adults. Your pool is 300 and what is it? 300 million people.
370,000, whatever
Yeah.
it is.
But
370 million, I mean.
yeah,
But that doesn't even include the 20 million.
yeah, but I mean, it's hundreds of millions of people. So, but if you go down to registered voters, which is the next one, it's basically 70% of that number. So you've taken 30% of people out who are not registered, and for whatever reason, maybe they're here illegally, maybe they, don't care, whatever it is. And then there's the third segment, which is likely voters, and these are people that are going to vote in whatever the upcoming election is.
And that's important for a midterm. If it were a presidential year, it would be a little bit less important. Now, there's a somewhat of a standard practice for some media organizations that they will switch to a registered voter frame, maybe closer to the summer, or likely voter in the fall. I personally think it should be likely voter the entire time. If it's the year before the election, I'm okay with a registered voter. Now, this is important because also the reason I'm bringing up the online panel, you go and look at the aggregate at Real Clear Politics. It is very likely that all of the polls included are 100% online panel. We call it panel trash. It's people who are compensated to do the survey, either by credits or actual payments, like $2-3 for doing the survey, and they've they have signed up to be in a panel. So they have to be someone who said, yes, I want to do polls regularly. And they do, I think on average for Ipsos, which is the number one, in my opinion, I'm saying this behind the sign up. They are one of the, I'll say something that is absolutely true. They're almost always the furthest off. They're also almost always the most cited, and also sometimes they'll be in the aggregate twice because it's the Reuters Ipsos poll, the ABC Ipsos poll, the Washington Post Ipsos poll. So they have a lot of these, what I would consider bad actors who are intentionally trying to put a thumb on the scale, it seems to me, and they will be way off. I was doing research a couple weeks ago in preparation for media appearance, and they were off by 11 points from the registered voters and the likely voter surveys. That is, and they're always doing adults only. But even when they do registered voters, they'll have like the presidential approval in the mid to low 30s or high 30s.
Yeah.
It's not believable in this country. And they had Joe Biden close to 50 sometimes. Like that just wasn't believable. It is just not believable. It seems to me to be propaganda. I don't know that to be a fact, but it is so consistently wrong that whether it's intentional or not, it has the impact of driving public opinion, and it is a real problem. But you look at that. So they have adults only online panel. And there's one reason why they would do it, which is it's cheaper. It's also well known that it's going to be bad for Republicans if you do adults only. It's just always has been that way. Whereas if you do registered voters, it's one way. And then when you do likely voters, it's one way. So when you do likely voters, the election looks a lot different. Now, the problem with likely voters is how do you actually ensure that you have the right people in for who are likely voters? And are you weighting your poll correctly? So that's where you get pollsters who maybe made assumptions that drove what the outcome was, and they miss the election. But, there's definitely there's noise in those numbers, and what you're getting to about noise in the numbers generally. And I think you should let people know why you think it's happening right now, why I think there's the Ipsos style of polls happening, and why there's trying to create this doom and gloom narrative. I don't think this is necessarily shaping up to be the best election for Republicans, and by history, it shouldn't be. Very rarely do midterms go the way of the president. 2002 is an example. 1998 are examples where they did, but typically that doesn't happen, especially in the modern era. But why is it you think that there is an extra little bit of pressure on this scale with the thumb?
Yeah, well, I think it's because right now we're in the season where some places it's passed, but some places it's happening right now. The filing deadlines for running for election or reelection.
Mm-hmm.
And so this truly is the best time to have your registered voter surveys. If the goal is how do we get a Democrat majority in the House and the Senate, what's the best way to do it? Well, it's to have the best candidates you can possibly have on your side and have Republicans retire, or your best candidates say, boy, this looks kind of tough. Maybe I'm not interested.
That was a great insight from Sean. So what Sean is suggesting in that clip is that ultimately what's going to happen is that they're trying to get Republican members of Congress. This is what he's surmising, that by creating the sense like the sky is falling, and it's not really falling, but it's not great, but it's also not falling, and things are not as bad as they were in 2018, and so on and so forth. So, but by creating this sense of doom and gloom, that if you're a Republican, let's say in a state that today was the day you could start filing your paperwork to run for re-election, you might be thinking to yourself, you know what, I don't really want to deal with the Congress post losing the majority. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me. I don't want to do that. And so by putting their thumb on the scale and trying to give that sense that things are going to be so terrible, that is going to have an impact on people deciding to run for office. And what that becomes is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oftentimes, the party that does the worst job of keeping their incumbents running for re-election is the party that will lose seats. So that is another factor that often has an impact in midterms and in presidential elections. So if your team, all of a sudden people say, you know what, I don't think I want to play this game anymore, I'm going to go home, and then you have a new person who's not run before, who doesn't have a war chest, who has very low name ID, who isn't well defined as far as their favorability and the messages they're associated with, and you have them as your candidate, well, this race that probably wasn't competitive before, all of a sudden is competitive. And then the challengers, the people trying to take over the House, they now have a much better opportunity. They have more races to go after. And you now have the team that does have the majority. They are dealing with primaries, they're spending more money in the primaries as opposed to the general election. So there's multiple facets on how this has an impact. So what Sean's suggesting, and he's absolutely right, that there is an intentional effort to create this sense of doom and gloom in Republican incumbents so that they retire, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that they lose the House. So that is what's going on, and it's like clockwork. You can pretty much set your clock to it. He mentions later in that clip, if you go to pollingclub.com and you watch the entire strategy session, he talks about it like the Kansas could be in play that you might see on MS Now occasionally, not occasionally, every single 4 years in about July, August. They'll start saying, maybe Kansas could be in play, and Kansas is not going to be in play. It hasn't gone for a Democrat since the 1930s. So that's not going to happen yet. It's a story that happens. And then you have what happens towards the end. So we talked about the different frames, as what we call as pollsters, the sample and who we're sampling. So they start off with adults, and then we'll move to registered voters. And what happens though is that they show like the election isn't good for Republicans. Let's be honest, it only goes one way. The election's not going to be good for Republicans until we get right to the end. Oh my gosh, they're closing the gap, and here we are. So there's things like this that happen every single election cycle, and you can just set your watch to it. And this is one of them. This is the if you're a Republican incumbent, you better drop out now because you don't want to go through the buzzsaw, and that is what they're trying to do. So it's smart, honestly. And if you have the control of the media and you can whip up that idea, then that's something to do. All right, moving on to segment 3, and just a reminder as to what we're doing here. We're doing what's kind of a unique poll. So I'm giving you a bit of an inside look from our exclusive strategy session with the Polling Club community, which you can join at pollingclub.com, either free or premium. And the community gives us input on what questions to ask, what topics to cover. We have free, premium, and elite members. Elite members get to decide the direction of an entire poll. We'd write the questions, but they get to decide where we're going to poll. And what's interesting with this one is we've decided to poll the political professionals. So we're polling Republican and Democrat political strategists, people who are vendors, people who are consultants, people who are active in the political process that get paid to do campaigns. That's who we're surveying to get their insights as to what they think is going to happen in 2026 and 2028, what technologies, how AI is impacting it. And that's what we're going to do. It's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. I've had fun putting together the survey, and you're getting to see how Sean and I go about the process of talking through, like, what are we actually we're going to survey, what's important strategically here. And there's a couple of things that came out of that I'd like to share with you. So I said that because it was behind the sign up, I was going to talk about Ipsos. It's perfectly fine. Ipsos, I consider them to be one of the worst of the pollsters, and to the point that I wonder what's going on there. However, part of what it is, it's what we call panel trash, and it's 100% online panel. Panel has a place in survey research, in market research. Sometimes it's the only way you can do a survey. But what it is if you do, we call it an online panel, an internet poll, that is people who sign up to take polls regularly. In the Ipsos case, on their own website, and they're very forthright about this, and that's to their credit. They say that I think it's 7 times a month at least, their panel members do surveys. That means those are different kind of people. These are people who are taking polls at least 7 times a month. And they know they're basically going through life knowing they're going to get tested on things. Their awareness of stuff changes because of that. They're now having more opinions on things because they're going to get asked about it. It is a much different kind of approach to life. And those are the people who are part of a panel. So that's different. That's the first thing. Well, how do you get people? Why would anybody want to be part of a panel? Well, it's because they're paid to be part of the panel. So there are people who are paid to be part of an online panel, and not people, everybody who's part of an online panel, for the most part, they're compensated somehow, either in credits, in different kind of sweepstakes, and monetarily. They're paid oftentimes between $2 or $3. That's not a lot. And when you pencil it, the amount of time it takes, it really isn't all that lucrative. These people are also not that good at math, obviously. If they're spending their time doing this, go sign up for an online panel. You'll see what I mean. You think it might be a good deal at first, and then you do a really long survey and you get paid $2 for it. You're like, why the heck did I do that? So you'll find that with what we call panel trash, online panel. It's okay if you have a portion of it. I like to have sometimes on certain kinds of surveys, 15 to 20% of the sample done through online panel, because you can get to some harder to get to demographics, some minority groups that you wouldn't be able to get to as easily. That's important. But this is the interesting thing when we're talking about AI. And I'm not sure if a lot of political professionals even know this, if we ask the question of them in this survey, if they would even know about it. Because there's compensation. I don't know if it's all because of, foreign influence in our elections and foreign adversaries trying to influence our public opinion research that's presented in the media and publicly available, or if it's just people intending to defraud and with the intention of making money. So if one person's doing, 7 polls a month and getting paid $2 to $3 for it, that's not that lucrative, obviously. However, if you create AI bots that will do this at scale, and this is something that's happening in the industry and public opinion research that is presented by a lot of media organizations, they are suffering from this. This is the biggest problem that's happening with online surveys, is that they have AI bots that will go and they will fill out these surveys. You'll have somebody, these are the people who could be participating in your survey if you have a 100% online panel. You might have a server farm in Russia that has done, a good portion of the responses to your survey. You could have, oftentimes, you have somebody with a VPN who's, a Cheeto-fingered couch potato who is doing the same survey, bouncing from, Hawaii to Ukraine to Sweden to Brazil, and they've done your survey 5 different times. You have the AI bot. You have all sorts of, somewhere in a different part of the world where $2 or $3 is a pretty good deal. You might have people doing a bunch of that there and having a kind of a troll farm type of a situation. So that is happening right now. And the interesting thing is, so that has an impact on public opinion, not actual public opinion, but the reporting of public opinion. It's one of the reasons why we have our own call center with real live people, having real live conversations with other real live people. We know that that's happening. And when we talk about the Todd Starnes thing at the end, where we talk about Gen Z and are they dumber, that's one of the important things. When you have real people talk to real people, there's better recall. And we can see this actually in the numbers. So that's one of the things that's happening with AI. Of course, the answer then, and what the better of the online panels are doing, and to their credit, they're using AI to detect AI activity. So it's a constant arms race of whose AI is better. Is it the bot farms, or is it the online panels? And they just keep, fighting it out. And we have a bunch of different methodologies that we use to be able to identify when there's issues and to be able to root it out. And it's a perfect example of how it's having a real impact on politics. So we're going to go to the final segment from this, and what we talked about were the defining issues for 2026. One of the things I want to ask the audience here is what would you want to know from political strategists? What would you like us to ask them? And one of the things I want to ask them is, what do political strategists think the defining issues are going to be for 2026 and 2028? It's a bit of a ways away still. I mean, we could have a lot of things happen, but that is what we're going to talk about in this segment, is what do political strategists think are going to be the top issues? So with that, let's go with it. One thing I want to talk about for this cycle is issues that will be defining issues. So the economy, as pollsters, we always know that the economy is always going to be important. So I'm going to play this, but we've watched how there's been lots of really good economic indications of things going well with the economy, but public sentiment has lagged that, which is typical, but it's been fairly pronounced, partly because of how the coverage has been. Thomas, you make that larger. Thanks. That's been going on, but this is the news today as we have this call.
Well, Kate, look, this is some encouraging news on the cost of living, right? Inflation took a big step in the right direction to start the year off. So consumer prices up by 2.4% year over year. That is an improvement from 2.7% in December that beat expectations, which were for 2.5%. In fact, this is a new 8-month low for annual inflation, month over month. Prices up by 0.2%. Also a step in the right direction, also beating expectation. Now, economists look really closely at core inflation, which excludes food and energy. Core inflation came in at 2.5%. That's notable because that's the lowest annual inflation rate for core since March of 2021, before the inflation crisis. Now, while we can't exclude food and energy from our family budgets, that's important because economists say that's a better indicator for where inflation is going. And when you look at the trend for inflation over the last few years, you can see there's been some improvement, right? It's been a little bit bumpy on this chart. It's been bumpy, but it has improved. There was this uptick in inflation starting last spring after the president slapped massive tariffs on imports. Inflation started to go heat back up to 3%, but thankfully it's trending back down. Now, when we look at some of the notable categories as far as what people are seeing at the store.
So that's what's going on. So you have that. In the core, he's absolutely right. That's, those are the things that people feel for the most part. But you have that happening at the same time that are the growth in the economy and take-home pay and all these things are increasing. They're increasing faster than inflation, that was the problem of the Biden years, is that inflation got up to 9%. It was, like that for a while, which then, for most things, and it's still, this is true to this day, are roughly 30% more than what they were. And some things it's, 100% more than what they were. So that you still feel that, but as incomes increase and improve, we have people right now, we're going to start having this now where people are getting tax refunds. This will be the biggest tax refund season in the country's history. All of those things together, that growth is outpacing inflation. That's where we needed to be. And now, is it moving fast enough? I actually think it might be. And one of the things I've there's been a lot of activity on the health policy front, and I don't think a lot of the media is covering this. But when I watch, and the Harvard Harris poll does a really good job of tracking key administration policies for whoever is in office. They'll usually track somewhere between 13 and 18 policies. and they generally do the same ones every month, but they'll fluctuate by a few of them. It has been consistent that the top policy for the Trump administration has been their efforts to reduce drug prices. And that is starting to break through in TrumpRx.gov, and having these. And what they're doing is they're doing a trim tab strategy or an Archimedes lever strategy. It is very clear. They're looking for what are the levers we can pull on that have the most leverage and we can have the biggest impact. So they went to the most expensive drugs, and they have negotiated most favored nation status for those pricing. And that's cut prices in half in some cases, or even more. That's a really big deal. And it's close to 80% or a little bit over 80% support. So that's across party lines. Now, that's people learning about it in the poll. So the key for the administration is to make sure everybody knows what you're doing here, because there's a few places where people feel cost. They feel it in food, they feel it in energy, and they feel it in health insurance and healthcare related costs. Those are the primary places people feel it.
I think the Trump administration has gotten that, and I think they might have learned this in the Obamacare fight, but this is when you've got something that you can say is going to be taken away by someone else. You've got a very powerful
fear of loss is one of the most powerful fears.
So I look at this, the Trump RX, and being able to have a lower prescription cost. I think you can easily say, if you're a Republican running this time, that Democrats would take that away.
They totally would. They would. I mean, this is something for Republicans on the issue front that they should be talking about. And I don't know what the answer is to this because we haven't asked it in our surveys. You're guaranteed not just impeachments of the president, you're guaranteed impeachments of Bondi. You have Democrats saying that she needs to be behind bars. And I mean, crazy stuff that's happening. Jason Crow, who is one of the seditious six, who did what I think is evil, honestly, to try to encourage young service members to disobey orders. I mean, they'd end up in the brig. They're not going to. These dumb senators and congressmen aren't going to be there to help them out when they get their life turned upside down because they watched MS Now and it convinced them to do something stupid, because they now are a constitutional expert to say, oh, it's perfectly fine for me to disobey this order because I just don't think it's legal. That's just crazy. Anyway, but he promised retribution. Mm-hmm. I mean, that guy's a piece of work. I do not like Jason Crow. I'm embarrassed that he's from Colorado, where I'm from. But what he's talking about is evil. I mean, he's talking real evil stuff, what he wants to do to Republicans. He wants to take out people like me. Like he wants to go down the ranks of people who are even, somewhat related to the Trump administration. He wants them in prison.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, I get that he doesn't like that they indicted him. They needed to indict him because you need to stop people from doing this kind of misbehavior. I think they thought they were onto something because of the drug boats. They had gotten a tip off that was happening. Now, once you had what's his face from Arizona, Mark Kelly, when he's asked about it after it comes out, was that an illegal order? He goes him and ha. He can't even answer it, and was the impetus for them doing that. It's very foolish. However, this is the kind of stuff that's going on. I'm curious if political consultants feel like they want to, you have James Carville talking about marching people through the street and spitting on them. I mean, that's crazy stuff.
Yeah, I think an interesting question would be of political professionals. Do you feel some sort of threat being in the political arena? Mm-hmm. Definitely be a different way to say that. But I think the interesting thing about the midterms this time is that Trump has figured out a way to have between Trump RX and the Trump and the accounts, for
the Trump accounts, and that's starting to get some real, honestly, just on the policy side of it, whether people like it. I mean, we have one of our colleagues who thought it was kind of nanny state, though I've also heard him say that he thinks it's great since I don't know if you remembered his comment before,
Yes.
but it is probably the thing that saves Social Security.
And the idea of it is something that I think we used to talk about the slow decline of America and stuff like that. I think these are the types of things that says, "Oh my gosh,
We
maybe
could
my kids,
we could fix it.
yeah, well, and maybe my kids can have a better life than I have," which has not been something that's in public sentiment um,
Totally.
for quite some time. I
That
think,
is key for Republicans if they want to turn it around. It's not just the economy does well, but they can't fix everything. Honestly, if you fix everything before the election, for Republicans watching this, you won't win. If you
well,
fixed everything, because you fixed immigration, you fixed it so much that it's now a problem for you.
yes,
So that is, you can't fix it all, but what you can do is paint a picture for a future. If we keep going in this path, you're going to get the world that you want.
yeah.
And if you don't keep going in that direction, you're going to get less of what you want. All right. So, talking about some of the key issues, and obviously we talked about the economy. Some of the highlights I think from um, that conversation that were interesting. Um, we have This is going to be the biggest tax refund season ever. I think people are going to, they're probably already feeling that. Inflation at 2.4%. That's 8-month low. I mean, that's amazing. Core inflation lowest since March 2021. Income growth outpacing inflation. Uh, Trump RX drug pricing. The Harvard Harris poll, I'm going to mention that in a second, but that is the top issue. The Trump administration's efforts to reduce drug pricing, and that's real, actual impact. When I said Archimedes lever or trim tab, what that is finding the thing that has the biggest leverage. Archimedes hammer or Archimedes lever, that's what that is. Or a trim tab. A trim tab is a thing at the end of a lever, at the end of a rudder, that when it gets turned, it just makes it so an ocean liner, for instance, can turn faster. It has the most leverage. So what they're finding is those top drugs that most people use that cost a lot of money, and they're focusing on it. I want to mention the Harvard Harris poll because I railed on online panels before. I think the Harvard Harris poll is one of the better public polls that's out there. They do it monthly. They have a lot of data over time, and it is 100% online panel. Now, one of the things that they do, which is something we also do, is they do what I call a multi-sample. So they don't just use a sample from one online panel provider. They build their sample from multiple different online panel providers, so that if there's a bias in any one of those, it's not showing up on it. If one of them's being attacked by AI bots, and they just have a better chance of getting a good sample. And I'm sure they have ways of making sure it's not the same people and across, and I actually have an idea of how that works. And it's something can't really talk about too much because it's proprietary, but they are doing the same thing. And kudos to them for doing the multi-sample, and they do a good job. But they track those issues on a regular basis, and it's really helpful to see that. And Trump RX is the top issue for the administration. We have a couple of questions here. I've got questions and some suggestions for questions for our survey of political strategists. So James T says, for me, the economy has been the biggest concern for months now. I know the data shows improvement, but our pocketbooks are still hurting. Do you expect that people will feel the improvements in time for the elections? I mentioned in the conversation with Sean, there is definitely a lag when it comes to public opinion and real economic indicators. The economic indicators have been pretty good for 6, 7, 8, 9 months, and people are starting to feel it. It is actually starting to shift in people's perspectives. I mentioned the Harvard Harris. There has been a shift in people who have a negative view of the economy, that has dropped. It's dropped. I can't remember how much, but it's like 2 to 4%, something like that. And then the people who have a positive view of the economy has increased by about 2 to 4%. So that's about, I think it is ended up being somewhere around between 6 and 8% swing, positive improvement, net improvement. That's a big deal. And if that continues month over month, that's a big deal. And I do think the Trump administration is starting to win on some of that messaging because the facts are the facts and people are feeling it. We have the Dow at 50,000, and that's a big deal. So you're starting to have people feel these things. And the big place where that's happening is that income growth is outpacing inflation. The inflation rate is dropping, and real wages are increasing, and we've actually outpaced what people had lost during the Biden administration. I'm pretty sure that's true for that. So that's when people are going to start feeling it, and if you can actually make some real movement on the drug pricing, that's a big place for people. Uh, so that's pretty powerful. All right, so we have another question from Mike R. Can you explain a bit more what you mean by if Republicans fix everything, they won't win in 26? Maybe they need to have something to work against, or their messaging won't be effective. Well, that is a really great question. Actually, as I was rewatching that, I thought people may be confused by that, and that is absolutely true. So unfortunately, I like President Trump's approach of let's fix everything and like get it done as fast as possible. But what happens is that if it's no longer a thorn in your side, once you solve it, people forget about it. They do not give you credit. They do not like, you know what, you fixed that border thing. We're going to make sure that you still have the Congress. That's just not how it's going to work. What's going to happen is, oh, the border, oh, that's fixed. I'm worried about X, Y, and Z. Or what the Democrats are trying to have it is, oh, you fixed the border, and now I'm not happy about that. It's kind of crazy to think that that could happen, but that's what is going on. And you have the Democrats right now. We have currently, as I'm speaking, the government is shut down partially with the Department of Homeland Security, and they are actively, and I'm sure it's poll tested. They talk about we have to have judicial warrants as opposed to administrative warrants. Well, that's something that's never been the case, and what they're ultimately trying to do with that is they're going to have people, they think people are dumb and that they're going to hear judicial. Oh, obviously it has to be judicial. It can't be administrative. And they think that that's probably positive, and probably in the polling, it shows that it is. But what that would effectively do is it would end immigration enforcement, which means that all these people the Democrats were able to bring in 4 years to change the census and ultimately change redistricting and ensure that they have more congressional members, members of the Congress, that they will be able to keep that and stop immigration enforcement, because that would effectively stop immigration enforcement because you would not be able to process all of the deportations. So that is, I don't know, it makes sense. Yesterday I was on Newsmax and we got asked about this clip of Hakeem Jeffries. He's on a left-wing podcast and they're trying to get him to talk about defunding ICE. Now, that to me says, despite the rhetoric that you see out there and despite the coverage that you see by the media saying that immigration enforcement and the Trump border policies are no longer popular, that is not true. I will tell you right now, it still is about 60% in general on most immigration related topics. 60% are in alignment with the president. And when you talk about deporting illegal aliens who have committed an additional crime while here, or they have committed a violent crime before they got here, it is 80+% believe that those people need to leave. That is across party lines. The majority is across party lines. So that is very much, people are in line with that. Now, they're horrified by what they saw. Now, from my perspective, I know that no large protest happens without people organizing it, and there's big money. I would recommend people read Peter Schweizer's new book, The Silent Coup. He talks about how the migration crisis happened from countries that were intending to do things, China, Mexico, even other countries through South America, including Venezuela, intending to send people into our country and to have an impact on our country. One of the crazy things that came out of that book, I've seen News Nation is one of the only news networks I've seen cover this. They had an interesting report last summer, is this idea of birth tourism that's happening from China. There's two things that happen. So they have people that, Chinese Communist Party members, people in the higher ups, they will fly to Saipan, which is within the American territories, and they will use their 45-day visa to give birth there, and then their child can be a dual citizen of China and the United States. They do all the paperwork, they get all worked out, then they fly back to China, and that's where the child is raised. And this all happened in the last 20 years, and it's been going on. They estimate that there's about 1.8 million children that have taken advantage of this, or their parents have. Additionally, this is a crazy thing. This is absolutely crazy, but it's true. And as I said, the News Nation covered this, and it's in Peter Schweizer's book. They are doing this surrogate mills. So in California in particular, they have Chinese Communist Party members who are set up there. And what they do is they have party members back in China. They send egg and sperm to the United States, then to be a surrogate mother in the United States is then paid a lot of money to take that resulting child to term, and then that child, once they're born, they have party apparatchiks who process all the paperwork for them to become a U.S. citizen, and then they get shipped back in business class. Apparently, if you're going to China, there's a lot of babies in business class, all being shipped back to China to eventually be voting members of our population. And you think about, it's estimated that that's about 40,000 to 50,000 of the surrogate mills, babies a year. The birth tourism is somewhere between 50 and 150,000 a year. I believe 2018 it was 150,000, what they estimate. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are happening. Most people do not know. Obviously, we have to deal with our immigration problems. We have foreign adversaries who are trying to take advantage of our laws, and we got to deal with that. I'm going to pivot from this. Thank you, Mike R. and James T. and Tim G. for your questions. And I'm going to see if I have a couple of suggestions from people. This is good. What percentage of your campaign budget in 2026 will involve AI tools? That's a great question, and I think one that we can encourage. I don't know how people think about it. I actually don't think people are probably actually budgeting that way yet. Do you believe media polling influences candidate retirements and recruitment decisions? Yes, and I think we've already. They're suggesting that we ask that of political strategists. Well, that's an interesting question based on this conversation. What is the biggest strategic risk AI poses to your campaigns? That's a good question. Has voter attention span decreased over the last 10 years? And has that changed how you design messaging? Well, I can answer that for myself. Yes. And speaking of Chinese Communist Party influence in our elections, TikTok is largely to blame for some of that. So that is that's great. So thank you for the questions, and keep them coming. And you can post them anywhere, even if you're watching this later on. We will grab these and go to pollingclub.com to join and become a member, free member or a paid member, and you can suggest questions we have. Most of our surveys are nationally of likely voters, but in this case, we're doing a unique one of political strategists, but we'll be doing other ones like that. I'm working on a survey of podcast listeners and what they're interested in. And you might find that interesting. Talking to folks about doing something specifically on crypto and people's understanding of it. So we always have very interesting things to be doing in the polling club, as well as important Senate races and other state and local races that people are interested in. So those are all available at pollingclub.com. And of course, if you like what you're seeing, like, subscribe, and follow us on wherever you're watching. So moving to this final segment for the show, I was on Todd Starnes Friday, and the news has been all about, terrible situation with Savannah Guthrie's mom. And it was interesting. Todd actually had other topics to talk about, and I've definitely appreciated that. And so we talked about, a lot of it was around education and students doing these walkouts. We had, Gen Z. He's going to set it up. This fellow who testified to Congress that Gen Z is doing worse than their parents. We'll talk about that, but I'll go ahead and I'll play the clip, and then I'll give you my additional thoughts afterwards.
All right, joining me now, Jackson Heberlin, a leader in the Clemson University College Republicans, also Dustin Olson, a pollster at American Pulse Research and Polling. Dustin, if there's any doubt left in anybody's minds that our public schools are being used to advance far-left propaganda, these protests have to be Exhibit A.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for any parent right now looking at their children going to public schools, you have to be thinking about other ways to educate your children. I know as a parent, that's what I'm thinking about. I live in the Fairfax area in Virginia. I would never send my kids to the public school here. So this is a result of propaganda, and you see all these walkouts and the protests, and we all know that large-scale protests don't just happen. So it's not just students, but there's adults who are paid to organize these things that are making this stuff happen. And there are, our foreign adversaries are very much supportive of seeing these sorts of things happen. The Chinese Communist Party and others are hoping to fan the flames of all this. So this is really us being patsies of people who don't care for our country.
Meanwhile, Jackson, at the University of Maine, a Border Patrol banned from presenting at a career fair after a group of students complained. School officials coddled them, saying organizers will, quote, ensure the event remains safe and inclusive. What say you?
It's absolutely crazy. I mean, we are seeing a full infiltration of our institutions. I can say I'm very fortunate to go to Clemson University, where we have a staff that cares about us and cares about America, but I know my peers at other colleges do not feel the same. We are seeing a level of a blatant partisanship exhibited even in many of our public universities and in a lot of our public high schools. Being someone who was in high school a year ago and is in college now, I feel like I've seen both sides of the spectrum. And I mean, you guys are fully correct in the way that there is a big change happening here and a big infiltration that needs to be investigated at a federal level.
Dusty, meanwhile, at the University of Michigan, a new survey out, and here's what they've discovered. A whopping 69% of transgender or non-binary undergrads say they've been victims of sexual harassment. And get this, they felt harassed when a biological male was referred to as a he. What do you make of that?
It's crazy, and it's unfortunate. And this is we call it the woke mind virus for a reason. People have been given a non-reality, and I imagine it's very difficult for people like that who have found themselves in a world where they're constantly experiencing cognitive dissonance, where their reality doesn't match their experience. And that is, I'm sure that's very troubling for them. And that's how you get, what I consider to be pretty bad statistics as a pollster. I wouldn't put much stock in a lot of the numbers in this survey.
All right, finally, Jackson, and we'll get both of you guys to weigh in on this. A top neuroscientist testifying before Congress, and he indicated that Gen Z is actually underperforming compared to previous generations. Let's watch.
until Gen Z. Gen Z is the first generation in modern history to underperform us on basically every cognitive measure we have, from basic attention to memory to literacy to numeracy to executive functioning to even general IQ, even though they go to more school than we did. So why? What happened? What happened around 2010 that decoupled schooling from cognitive development? It can't be school. Schools basically look the same. It can't be biology. This hasn't had enough time to change. The answer appears to be the tools we are using within schools to drive that learning.
So basically, he's saying, Jackson, your generation, you guys are not all that smart. Dr. Horvath recommending schools need to back away from technology and return to good old-fashioned book learning. Jackson, what say you?
I absolutely agree. You know, I'm very fortunate to have gone to private school for my primary education, and it helped a lot because moving into the public system, it's all iPads and computers and Chromebooks and MacBooks, and it's like, where is the real connection of just writing on paper and actually associating with your ideas? And you talk about Gen Z, I mean, look towards Gen Alpha. This is a generation growing up with AI as their primary search tool. I find it ridiculous to believe that people are going to grow up surrounded by technology that coddles all of their weaknesses and allows them to, with the click of a few buttons, get all the information in the world. I mean, in what other way could you deprive critical thinking to that degree? I fully agree. We need to return to tradition and how students are taught. And as someone who went from private to public, I've seen that dichotomy very clearly.
All right, Dustin, I want to give you 30 seconds here. You know, I went to school, we had number 2 pencils, and we barely had electric typewriters. So I'm old school.
Well, totally. And it's actually been proven scientifically that when you handwrite with a pen or pencil, that you actually tend to remember things better. When you have to read physically, you remember things better than any of these technology-aided things. As pollsters, you know, we spend a lot of time thinking about how messages stick with people. And when you're not present and you're not paying attention, it's not a permanent thing. It's not that they're not smarter. It's just they're not paying attention. They have too many things going on. And that has a lot to do with recall and intelligence scores.
All right, fellas, we're going to have to leave it there. Dustin, Olson, Jackson, Heberlin, Guy.
Well, that was great, and thank you for Todd for having me on regularly. And that kid, Jackson Haberling, I believe he's a freshman at Clemson. Very well spoken, interesting kid. I believe he's involved in Turning Point. But isn't that great to see young people who are outspoken? They're out there. They're speaking up. And when I was a freshman, I would have had no idea how to get on TV. That's pretty impressive to me. It took me nearly 40 years to figure that out. So talking about this, so I thought this was fascinating. It's a really great question. As you saw, I said that there's actual science behind this, and it's something as pollsters that we actually pay attention to. So in our polling, we talked about modes a lot during this conversation, different methodologies. We have, you know, the online panel, or we do what we call text to web, where someone gets texted a survey and then they fill it out on the web browser on their phone, or we have people who do it through an automated phone call where they press 1, 2. That's a little bit less used these days. And then what we consider the gold standard and what we focus on, since we have a call center that does this, we have trained interviewers who spend their time talking to real people. And it's interesting when you have that human to human interaction, you have people slow down and you have them think, and there's really, you know, one brain connecting with another brain, and you get better responses. People speed through the web, the web-enabled surveys. So from the text and from the online panels, people speed through those. They can do that. You can tell that they're not thinking as much. For the most part, people do those much faster. Whereas when they talk to somebody, they're less engaged. It's also interesting because younger people, Gen Z, are less engaged and they're constantly distracted. They do not do our surveys by text. I mean, certain portion do, but it's not the number one way they do it. And it's not online panel that they do it. The best way that we have to engage younger people is by talking to them on the phone. We call them, they don't get as many phone calls, and then they engage, and it's something that's totally different for them, and it gets them to slow down. And that's actually what's going on. So in a survey or a study in Norway, they actually studied the impact of handwriting over typing. So when you type, people can do that so fast. Not me, but most people can do it so well that they do it fast enough that it's almost like they're transcribing. When you transcribe, when you're able to type as fast as someone speaking, you are actually not processing what's being said. Handwriting forces you to slow down. You can't write as fast as the person speaks, so you have to have economy. You have to choose words. You have to prioritize what's important. You have to focus on things that way so that it's you have to make choices. That's the important thing of how handwriting works, and it makes you prioritize, summarize, think, and it's ultimately it helps you with recall and memory. And it's actually something I've started doing for when I do media. I make sure I handwrite everything so that it helps me remember things, and it really does work. Now, on the other side of it, in Japan, they did a study where paper versus screens really helps with recall. So what happens is that when you are scrolling digitally, you are it's not seeing information in relation to other things. You are, but when you're reading a physical book, you're actually seeing it on a certain page, and you have the physical. It actually helps with memory and mapping and encoding. So that is a big thing as to how it helps people with recall. Additionally, there's what we call the Google effect, and this is the illusion of knowing. So this is going to get worse with AI, I have a feeling, though AI might solve some of these other things because you can actually have an interaction where you can test learning. But the Google effect is the idea of I don't have to know it because I can go find it. And so what that happens is people don't exercise that memory bank. So this is all what was behind what I said there. So, ultimately for classrooms, what you want to do is replace the devices with physical books, with handwriting and paper. You want to look at ways to help people focus and do less multitasking. And ultimately, the takeaway I had from all this is that the pen is mightier than the board or the keyboard ultimately. So anyway, those are some thoughts as to what you might do, and a little bit of an insight into how, if you are actually a candidate who's running for office and you want to better remember your messages and really work through what you say in public, a great way to do that is to handwrite, because it actually does truly improve your recall. Well, with that, that's what we have for the show today. Thank you to everybody for participating. If you could like and subscribe on YouTube, X, Facebook, or your favorite podcast platform, I really do appreciate everybody who took the time to go through some of this content. If you'd like to be part of the Polling Club and help us determine what we survey next, go to pollingclub.com. Join the community. You can join it for free, or you can join it as a premium member or even an elite member, and determine the direction of an entire poll. It's a great way to help have an impact in the national conversation, to give voice to the American people. And we really do appreciate everybody who did that. Again, thank you for your time today, and we'll see you on the next Political Trade Secrets.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes, and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.